Welcome to the Principles of Performance podcast, where we discuss how to optimize your health, fitness, and performance. Drawing on decades of experience of working as coaches, consultants, and trainers to top performers, athletes, and teams from professional sports to top universities to the U.S. military, Eric DeGatti and Mike Perry discuss topics and strategies of how to perform at your highest level and be your very best. Join us and our friends and colleagues who are leaders in the fitness and performance industry as we investigate and challenge the most popular training, nutrition, lifestyle, and recovery protocols. And away we go. Here we are with the Principles of Performance podcast. I'm your host, Eric DeGatti, along with my friend and co-host, Mike Perry. Mike, we have someone on the show who's been on our wish list for a while, and it's only because you never stop talking about this woman and all that you've learned from her.
That sounds weird.
Amanda, if you're listening, it's purely professional, Amanda. But yeah, and every time we teach, he's always raving about her work, and so we definitely are super excited to have Coach Carmen Bott on with us today. She's got a master's degree in exercise science. She's a certified strength and conditioning specialist and a practicing kinesiologist. As a physical performance coach, she's got 20 years of hands-on experience training athletes at the learn to train level all the way to high performance professional level. She's also evolved into an international educator. She's teaches all over in combative and repeat sprint team sport athletes, and she's consulted worldwide. She's been a guest on many podcasts and a keynote speaker at the 2019 ASCA Conference. And after several years working with top wrestlers, she also published The Wrestler's Edge, which has been sold worldwide. And in addition to all of that, she's also a full-time lecturer at Simon Fraser University teaching applied kinesiology. And we're so excited to have you on the show, Coach Bott.
Wow. Thanks, Eric. I appreciate that.
So, guys, before we get in, Coach Bott has been one of those people that has been sort of my go-to when I was stuck, or I was like, I had questions on protocols, or I was needing help interpreting the science. And that's why I'm pretty pumped to have Carmen on here, because she's one of the few people that can actually look at the research and read the research the right and correct way, and actually take that information and figure out the most effective way to apply it in real life. And most people are good at one or good at the other, or say they're good at one, or they have a bias. But the fact that she can take us through this entire process and share that with us, that is like one of my favorite parts about learning from Coach Bott. And when I need something, I say, hey, can I schedule a call? I'm having some issues here, or I need your advice here. So she's been my go-to, and she's been a go-to for a lot of people out there as well. Kind of, sort of stays a bit quiet, if you will, but a lot of people ask her for her advice. So we're really excited to have her on here. But before we get going, we have to start off with, one of my favorite quotes is, think like a scientist and act like a coach. What do you mean by that?
Gee, that's a good question. I think I came up with that around 2014, because I was putting together a course that was really heavy in like metabolic energy systems for trainers, like for people that work with people. And I kept thinking about how I was taught this information. And this is, of course, no disrespect to my teachers in university, but it was like, okay, here's a picture of the Krebs cycle, and here are all the enzymes, and here's how many ATP are produced. And if it goes this way, it makes more ATP. If we do that, it makes less ATP. And I remember sitting there going, I have no idea what this is. I have no idea what they're talking about. How does this apply to when I go and I exercise or I work out? So I kind of made it a mission of mine, because I think it's important for all of us as practitioners to have a really clear purpose and a really clear mission. I've always sort of come from the foundation of trying to educate people, whether it's my clients. Like I had a 15-year-old in last night. He's a really high level football player. He's Canadian, but he plays at a private school in the US. trying to teach him the why, behind what he's doing. So that helps him, buy into it, right? So it really was born out of, I think, my frustration of trying to learn this stuff initially and then not being able to apply it very well. And then being tasked with teaching it at a college or university level and going, oh my gosh, this is where it's really going to be obvious if I don't know my stuff. The students are going to ask me questions like, well, coach, how does this apply in this context? And I'm going to be like looking at the diagram going, well, there's this many enzymes and this much ATP and right. So I don't remember the enzymes, you two, and I do not know how many ATP, but I do know how to write a protocol that's going to make somebody eat their competition for lunch, hopefully. So that's the goal.
Awesome. All right. Well, before we went live, we were talking about some common friends that we have. And one of the names that came up was Rob Butler. And to kind of connect the dots here, I met Rob through FMS when he was still at Duke. And what he explained was he had the K Lab, and he said, I got millions of dollars worth of laser beams and all the other stuff. And he said, I still get just as much information by, taking 10 minutes really watching somebody move. And so that's evolved since that conversation has happened. That's evolved tenfold with AI and all the new technology. I just saw on my scroll this morning about something that scans you and will evaluate your movement. But with all this modern sports science, tell us why you say that we should still trust our eyes and communication skills over tech.
Maybe because right now the tech's not validated yet against 3D motion capture, which is sort of the gold standard, but it's still highly clinical, right? So when I say highly clinical, I just mean actually the clinical is by definition is the use of human subjects, just so you guys know that that's what that means. And your readers know, because I don't want it to sound snobby. Anyone that works with humans is a clinician, okay? You could be a trainer and a clinician. You don't have to be a physio to be a clinician. But back to your point around looking at movement and this idea of being in a lab environment, Rob's right in that everything is very sterile in a lab environment because it has to be. We only have so much square footage, right? And so we're probably only having that person do one movement. So imagine doing one vertical jump. And that's it. So now we're going to get a picture of how this person jumps one time. If we actually looked at motor behavior research, we would actually learn that the human brain makes actually quite a few adjustments rep to rep, even though we might still land in the same spot. So if that's our outcome measure, landing in the same spot, the strategy that we use to actually do that jump can vary just a little bit. There was quite a bit of research that came out about a decade ago on people that threw darts at a dartboard, right? So I can't remember what that sport's called, but the pub sport. So the pub sport, throwing darts at the dartboard, and these guys were hitting the bullseye like over and over. Yet when they analyzed the film, so the movement, they noticed that the release point was slightly different on every single throw. Yet they're still hitting the dartboard. So, human beings, the way we move, the way we do tasks, the way we execute sport skills works within hitting a dartboard, right? The confines of good movement, but there's still this room for variability in movement. And so it's really hard to capture that when we're trying to look at things predictably in an unchaotic environment when we're only doing it once, right? Yet in sport, that athlete will take 35 shots in a game, maybe in basketball, or if they're an NHL athlete, they might, pass the puck 42 times. Well, did that look exactly the same each time? But we do know what constitutes pretty good passing mechanics. So, when we get into sort of quantifying movement and using force plates and so on and so forth, I do think that there's room for that, that information, but I don't think that's where we should start. So I think technology is a good helper. It's a very good assistant coach. But the head coach is still the eyes, and having a technical model that we operate in. If that makes sense.
Okay, so let's take an example where that can come to play and something that you're passionate about is looking at trying to quantify, trying to correlate, tried to connect the dots and causal factions to predicting and then trying to prevent injuries. Now, ACL injuries is something that you're very big on, and so kind of let's talk about this epidemic that's somewhat a relatively new phenomenon, but it's getting worse instead of better.
It's getting worse. There are certain sports where it's escalating very fast. One of them is women's field lacrosse, actually, Mike. So used to be always women's soccer, girls soccer, and now field lacrosse is in second place, for that epidemic. And there's also an epidemic of re-injury, especially in the adolescent athlete, which is typically a physically immature athlete. So, Eric, are you asking me if there is very strict criteria in how somebody moves to predict whether or not they'll tear their ACL? So, is that the question?
Well, that, kind of tying in with the tech, it makes it harder to do to have those predictable models because it's so multifaceted, right? And then I guess a follow-up to that also would be, and it's going to kind of lead into Mike's next question is, okay, obviously we've seen higher numbers, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, higher numbers in female, relative in female sports versus male sports. And we like to, immediately blame it on Q angles and so forth. But is it just that females get shittier training than males sometimes?
Absolutely. So, Sophia Nifis and I have talked about this a lot. She's a researcher in Australia. She's a very, very good researcher and a coach, and was an athlete in her day. And we've talked about the socio-cultural side of sport. And, a lot of times the girls are not necessarily empowered and encouraged to strength train, or perhaps they're not actually encouraged soon enough, because girls mature 2 years sooner than boys when it comes to things like puberty. They actually need to start sooner, but a lot of times they don't. They often start later because by then they're getting that intervention, they're getting that assistance, they're getting that help. So there needs to be more programs available for young female athletes. There needs to be more education with coaches on implementing drills or strategies or solutions into a practice environment that doesn't take a lot of time. And there needs to be more normalization of girls' resistance training, because a lot of girls worry, oh my gosh, if I do this, I'm going to end up looking like Hulk Hogan or whatever WWE wrestler was popular back in the, 80s and 90s. So, which is a myth. We know that, but and it does depend on the sport. So I work with a lot of female rugby athletes, and those girls are happy to lift as much as possible. I had a 13-year-old in last night deadlifting 185 pounds. She's very strong and is very open to doing that type of work. Sometimes other sport, culturally, it's just not as popular to get stronger. So we do have maybe a strength problem, not necessarily, this idea of a Q angle, that's a given. Sure, females have a wider pelvis. It does change the biomechanics of the lower limb. But if you watched Michael Jordan play basketball back in the day, he was pigeon-toed and knock-kneed, and he didn't tear his ACL. So we can't necessarily blame it on like one factor. It is multifactorial, but the low-hanging fruit is, hey, let's encourage girls and boys just to get a little bit stronger, because oftentimes they're specializing in one sport, which is another problem, another beast in of itself, because they lack the motor skills, the buffet of motor skills that a multi-sport athlete would hone. I even see it in my son's basketball. Like if kids play other sports, they level change better than kids that just play basketball, typically.
All right, so I want to circle back on one more thing on the ACLs discussion of something that you just mentioned of, we're commonly taught that it's this valgus collapsing in moment that is what's causing a lot of this, especially in the non-contact injuries. But what's the result of that is we've gotten so afraid of it. We get very robotic in the gym when we never get into those positions. So we don't know how to handle those positions dynamically. They're going to happen, like you said, in the chaos of sport. So how do we balance that of not letting you go there, but also preparing you to be there?
Yeah, I mean, two of the main mechanisms, and I think that's what we should go after, are single leg landings. So girls are tearing their ACLs, single leg landings. So, gee, maybe we should have some single leg landings in our training program. We know the ground reaction forces in single leg landings are markedly higher than even doing a body weight bilateral trap bar deadlift, for example. So single leg landings, make sure that those are in the program. And another mechanism is what we call a too wide of a sidestep cut. So if you imagine an athlete running straight forward, plants their outside foot, so let's say it's their right foot, to cut to the left at 90 degrees. Okay. So that foot, when it gets placed, oftentimes when athletes aren't as strong, they will place that foot wider because they have to place it wider in order to accomplish that task. Because the brain just knows, go straight, cut right, or cut left. That's what the brain knows. Brain doesn't know that we don't own strength with the foot closer to being underneath the hip. So if the foot is placed wider, generally what happens is the knee has to come in more in order to initiate that movement pattern. So getting the entire chain, so the glutes, the hamstrings, as well as the landing mechanics and the cutting mechanics cleaned up. So we need to work the mechanics of the movement, sure, but we also need to make sure that we're training the hip. And one of the best ways to train the hip is actually through a really comprehensive plyometric program, more so than even using some of the gym-based exercises that we see, like a Cossack squat or a side plank. We can do those things, but I still think that there's a gap if we're just doing those things and then expecting an athlete to use the transfer from the weight room to the field, because it's too big of a gap. Like, the movement patterns in the gym are not the same as the movement patterns in sport. So teaching kids how to cut and change direction and the proper foot placement, making sure that they're dorsiflexing the ankle when they plant the foot, so not going into the ball of the foot. The other thing is we want to teach them what to use quite a few deceleration steps. So not going as hard as they can and then reaching for the line, like in a case of like a suicide or a 180-degree cutback, where the athlete is coached to run out of line and do a pivot turn on the line. They actually should decelerate leading up to the line and end up loading mostly on the inside foot, not on the outside foot that they've planted. And then their torso should actually be angled into the angle of the cut. If you think about a hockey player, turning on the ice, you see how they lean into that turn. They do that very, very well, and they use the edge of their skate. Well, we can actually teach field sport athletes how to do that effectively, so that way there's just more load that's on the body is shared amongst all the tissues and all the ligaments. So we do use the weight room. The weight room's great for building up the tensile strength of a ligament, so the threshold is higher, but then we need to bridge that on the field. And when I started coaching, Eric and Mike, like, this was in 1998, and most of the workshops I went to before I met Pavel with the RKC and Brett Jones and people that taught me a lot about strength training, more than I had already known at that point. I was working with coaches that were masters of multi-directional speed and track and field. So I was learning this stuff in workshops where we were actually doing the drills and learning to coach the drills. And then over this evolution of practice in this field, I'm starting to see coaches that do not coach and do not leave the weight room. Like, that's just where they coach. Or physiotherapists, if they're doing high-level rehab in an ACL, I tell them in my course, look, you've got to leave your clinic at 6 months post-op. If you're not prepared to leave your clinic and be on a field or a basketball court, then you need to pass the baton to an SNC or a kinesiologist or someone that does on-field or on-court work to bridge this gap and return that person back to their sport safely, because you want to mimic the demands that they're going to be facing. So one of the reasons why athletes are re-injured is because the rehab itself is incomplete.
All right. So, we briefly touched upon this, but we want to go back to it. Male versus female training, right? And we know that one of the biggest issues that we have is just lack of quality training. But can you give us some biggies? Are there any biggies that we need to consider, male versus female, that every strength coach should know?
what are the differences between
Yeah,
coaching a
like
group of girls
considerations.
versus a
Like
group
if
of boys?
if you've got a strength and conditioning coach and they've got a group of 15-year-old
Yeah.
boys and a group of 15-year-old girls, what would your considerations be initially?
Well, let me start with the social side of it, the social psychology side of it. There are differences and they are general. So not every boy is like this and not every girl is like this. There can be girls that are extremely tasky and are not interested in the social side when they get to training. We have other girls that are majority, tend to want to socialize and connect before they engage. So connection tends to be of high value. One of the reasons why girls drop out of sport, the number one reason, in fact, is lack of connection and not getting along with teammates. So you want to make sure that you create an environment where the girls feel like they belong, where everybody, doesn't matter what level you're at. You don't have to be the best in the weight room. You don't have to be the strongest, where they're very cooperative as well. So you've got your veterans helping your rookies. Girls by nature are more cooperative. I'm going to get canceled, guys, for saying all of this. You know that, right? That's the general social side of it. And also we have to consider historical social stuff, like girls being told that they shouldn't be rough or that they shouldn't be aggressive or girls shouldn't swear, things like that, right? So we might need to be aware of this. And we want to empower. And I'm not saying we don't empower boys, we empower girls slightly differently. Now, as far as prescription goes, so let's talk purely physiology and science. No difference, everybody out there. Get out there and get after it with girls. So you can give them the same doses, the same exercises, the same steps, sets and reps scheme, the same drills. There is no girl program, right? With the boys, I will start with an example. So I have a lot of alpacas that I train, as Mike will attest to. Those are, brothly haired boys that travel in packs. And when they get in the weight room, it becomes the game of one-upmanship, meaning who ranks higher than the next, right? Because competition is encouraged socioculturally. Where they rank on the pecking order is encouraged and valued. They are constantly comparing each other. There is chirping, depending again on the sport. There are different types of chirps based on sport, and that is important. As an S&C, you must know that lacrosse players and ice hockey players win the chirping award by a landslide, and that basketball players and football players are a little bit further down. They're not quite as mean. So that's the sociocultural piece. With boys, they will often not care about having the prerequisites before they try something new. Girls care very much about competency before confidence. So boys, oh yeah, I can do that. Let's give it to me, coach, right? And then, the disaster happens. Somebody gets pinned under the bench press and we're all helping that person not die. So that's, again, very general. There's going to be boys that are extremely thoughtful and conscientious and weigh the pros and cons before they try things. So we do want to notice those kids as well. But those are the general differences. And then what are we programming for boys versus girls? Again, there are no differences. The keys are we want to analyze the sport itself. We want to analyze what are the common injuries in that particular sport. Right? In collision sport, we know that there's going to be more concussions. There's going to be more dislocations. So we want to make sure we've got really strong, robust shoulders. We've got strong necks in those collision and contact sports. In your more higher skill-based sports, which are your baseball players and your basketball players. And you also have kids that play non-invasive sport for a reason, meaning they don't want contact. They don't want to touch other people, right? They want to play baseball because they don't have to touch the other person, or they want to play tennis. So, there's certain drills, like maybe you don't do combative wrestling based drills with those types of athletes because they're not used to it. They don't like it. They're not going to try that hard. because they're not used to it. So you use those exercises with other kids. But girls by nature, as I said, are highly cooperative. And so because they are, what I used to do when I worked in varsity sport with basketball is I'd always have my vets pair up with rookies. And I would tell the vet, look, if you want this kid to develop and be a contributing force on this team, you need to help them. And they would really take that on, like big sister type role. Boys, on the other hand, you pair a vet with a rookie and they're going to beat the shit out of them a little bit, pardon my French, which is just more of a boy thing. So it depends. Maybe we don't pair that rookie that's a little bit more conscientious and a little bit more cerebral with that vet, because then you might discourage that boy. So boys actually tend to quit sport more, not because of interpersonal conflict, it's because they're not having fun. So
So
allowing them to goof off a little bit is actually okay. A few alpaca jokes. Mhm.
the two things that I might add a step further, I'd love to get your feedback on, is one, with boys, knowing that information is how you can leverage that, and knowing that because they have that competitive one-upsmanship to them, that the more you can gamify anything, the more they're going to be engaged. And, even whether it's your big lifts and you're doing a 5-3-1 program, and I'm putting on the whiteboard whoever gets the most reps on their last set, or we're going to do a broad jump or something that's competitive, they're going to always engage more. And it's the only way sometimes you're going to get intent out of them, because you have to give them, this is what your buddy just did, right? Now, on the female side, what I found is they're much quicker learners because they actually listen. And so you can leverage that you can get a little bit more, I think, I don't know what the word I'm looking for has been, engaging. You can get a little bit more adventurous with the movement type of stuff you're going to do with them, because they're actually going to listen and pay attention and give you the space to teach a little bit more than the guys are like, okay, how many am I supposed to do? How much am I supposed to do? Type of mentality. So talk about how you can leverage knowing what we know, right? And we've already assumed that we've been canceled already for what we've said. Knowing what we know, how we can leverage what we know is their strengths and shortcomings to make us better as coaches, so they're more engaged, so they do keep coming back, so they don't quit.
I guess I don't have much to add, Eric, other than I completely agree with you. I think it's absolute wisdom that you've shared, and just knowing your audience, knowing the kids, and knowing that there are very evidence-based, I would even say, differences, sociocultural differences between coaching boys and girls. And like you said, actually chasing that versus trying to go like resist it, right? Surf with it, go with it. If you've got girls that are listening, then you're absolutely right. What a wonderful opportunity to teach them Olympic weightlifting, right? Whereas with boys, you might actually say, and when I do this with the high school boys, I tell them, you cannot front squat with a barbell until you can goblet squat 100-pound dumbbell, or whatever metric I've chosen relative to their body weight. So I've had to sort of make them earn it by getting them to focus more on the process and less on the outcome. The outcome being this much load, the process being doing it this way. And then you can get the boys to buy into that, and you can get girls to be, more competitive. So I do agree that we play to the strengths of that particular group, but we could also go, okay, girls could maybe be a little more competitive, because if they don't practice hard against each other in practice, that isn't going to show up in the game. So they do need to learn that it's not a threat to go hard at someone. We had a point guard when I was at University of British Columbia that would go hard every single practice. And the girls were afraid of her, to be honest. Like, they were like, oh God, what is she going to bring today? We won 2 national titles with this team, with this leader, because she would push the girls way out of their comfort zone. And it worked because they respected her, because she was a dog. She would come in and just work her butt off. And so you can't not respect somebody that shows up every day so committed and so ready to work. It's going to elevate everyone, right? So if you identify that person in that group and they're comfortable being disliked at times, then that could be your leader in a female team.
Hey, everybody, a quick break in the action here. Hope you're enjoying the show and we appreciate you listening. We're working hard to bring you the highest quality content and best guests every single week. So if you could do us a big favor and go and like and subscribe to the show on whatever platform you get your podcasts on, it would be greatly appreciated. Be sure to listen at the end of the show also to find out more information about our courses, as well as a special discount code for all our listeners. Thanks again, and let's get back to the show. Well, we could go down a rabbit hole with culture here.
I was going to say this podcast could take a very different turn, and you're going to have to miss miss graduation tonight, Coach. No, just kidding.
But yeah, I mean, the expression is when your best player is also your hardest worker, then you got a shot at doing something special. When it's the other way around, you're screwed. And the only other thing I would say on biases based on gender is give boys 5 minutes of arms at the end of every workout, and they'll love you to death, right? I used to be the guy that would stand on the box and say, bicep curls don't win us championships. And then I realized, they go to LA Fitness and do it on their own anyway.
Do it anyway.
So I might as well do it under my watch, and then I get more buy-in with me. So
do you guys want to know the bicep ladder? Do you want me to share the bicep ladder?
Oh, I love
drill?
it.
This drill
we would love it.
This drill is just epic. So you got two guys, they're partnered up, right? So Eric, you're partners with Mike. Eric, you got a 45-pound barbell in your hands. You do 1 rep. Pass it to Mike. Mike does 1. You go 2. Mike does 2. You go all the way to 10, all the way back to 1. Enjoy the pain.
Love it. Yeah, we used to do something like that where we go trade off, where one guy was doing push-ups and the other one did curls, and it was 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, and we did 5 minutes of arms at the end, and they couldn't lift their arms when they were done, and they were never more excited. And we used to call the drill
100%.
We used to call the drill looking good coming off the bus. And I would tell them, like, you guys may stink, but at least we'll look good coming off the bus.
Absolutely. And even female athletes will buy into that. So you ask them, what do you value? Glutes and abs. Okay. So then you do some glute bridges and some, abdominal, like some V-sits or some hanging leg raises at the end of the workout. Same concept. The thing is, you're not going to smoke an athlete doing like a quote unquote isolation type exercise at the end of a workout. They're going to recover fine. I mean, if you did something ridiculous like the squat German volume program, you'd bury
nice little
them,
finisher,
right? Right. But absolutely. So find out what the kids value and plug it in there, because that's retention, that's adherence. They're going to keep coming back. And at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to keep kids busy and keep them in sport and keep them driven with purpose and working really hard, because that shows up later in life in everything we do.
Love it. So I'm going to shift gears. And one of the things that I really admire about and following the stuff that you post in your work is that you're the first one to step up and challenge dogma and trends and buck that and question it a little bit. And I know there's certain things that we can poke the bear with you, Coach Bott. And one of them is the discussion of isometrics. All right. They've been super popularized in sports performance lately, and you've been kind of vocal about your criticism. And I want to know, is the issue more with the validity of it, or is it more the misapplication of it?
I would say it's more in the misapplication. Anytime I'm critical, it's because the person that's sort of propagating the solution or the method is sort of almost letting it seem as if this is the solution in all context. So if somebody has a Achilles tendon rupture and we are bringing them back to play, there's going to be time in that rehab process where we are doing isometrics and we are doing long hold isometrics. I think some of my problems are in the terminology and also in the amount of force an isometric can generate. So isometrics, the disadvantages are that they don't transfer to motor performance, task performance. So an isometric mid-thigh pull may not translate to a excellent vertical jump. Okay, so we can't claim that it improves performance, but we really even need to be clear on what performance even is. So let's just say jumping, counter movement jumping. So there's not much evidence to support in a highly trained population. Let's keep that clear, that doing having a high isometric thigh pull is going to improve counter movement vertical jump performance. There's also the idea of when things are pre-planned and I'm generating force into the ground, even if I did these exercises on force plates and it's measuring the amount of newtons of force I'm producing, those newtons of force are still markedly lower than what an athlete would produce doing a high tier or intense tier hopping plyometric, like not even close, right? So if I have a 220-pound, 6'4" defenseman that plays in the NLL that can do plyometrics well, which is pro lacrosse, they're putting way more force into the ground than somebody doing a mid-thigh pull even on one leg, or an ankle foot isometric. So it's a stepping stone. That's what it is, to higher levels of mechanical force production where reflexes are involved. And that's sort of where it is, full stop. Now, the other issue I have is terminology. When they say that there are yielding isometrics, which are like holding isometrics, and then pushing isometric. So HEMAs and PEMAs. I did a whole course in this area last year where I went down the rabbit hole of isometrics and I wrote like a short course manual. And when I started really thinking about what a pushing isometric was, which is imagining I'm up against the wall, right? And then on the count of three, like 3, 2, 1, I like push into the wall as hard as I can and as fast as I can. I thought about that and I thought, okay, but if I were doing a side plank or a side bridge, and under these current categories, it's called a holding or a yielding isometric. So I'm just holding that position. Am I not pushing my forearm down into the ground in order to hold that tension? I mean, that's how I'm coaching it. And I guarantee, not ever watching Mike coach a side plank, I guarantee he's doing that too, based on the principles that we've learned through the RKC, right? Like, think about even how we were taught how to shoulder press, that you're actually pushing yourself away from the weight to pack the shoulder and engage the lat to have a higher level of press, to press more load. And I think really what's happened is some of the people that are professing that these are PEMA ISOs have just never learned this stuff from Eastern Europeans, Russian coaches that really taught people how to be super strong, not necessarily just powerlifting strong, but strong on everything, how to generate tension, massive amounts of tension. And it's always better to have a volume dial of tension that can go up to like 20 decimals. And maybe for that task, you only require 5, but you own that. That's your strength reserve. And we know that athletes with a higher strength reserve, with that ability to turn up the volume, are just stronger in general. And they have more muscular endurance and more power endurance. So strength, having good levels of strength is never a bad thing. And to me, every PEMA isometric is actually a HEMA isometric. So we got really confused with all this extra terminology. And that's, I think, doing a disservice to new strength and conditioning coaches coming in. So you're just finished your university degree. You learned about isometrics in your degree in your 4th year of biomechanics, or maybe your 2nd year. And now it's like, oh, but you didn't learn that there were all these other ways to do isometrics, when there really aren't a lot of other ways to do isometrics. We can hold positions for certain periods of time. And usually if the intensity is a bit lower, I can hold that position longer. Like for someone that's trained to do a wall sit, they could do a wall sit for, I don't know, 20 minutes. Like, if they could, if they're a trained person, I wouldn't recommend it, but they could.
It's a great goal. What's your goal? I want to wall sit 20 seconds. I got the plan for you.
Right? Exactly. So, or 20 minutes. So it's
20 minutes. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, right. So isometrics aren't like bad. I think that they're very useful, and they're useful when somebody is in a lot of pain, or they have a deficit at a particular joint angle that you've been able to identify through your assessment and your testing. They just don't own those angles. Okay, great. Let's do some isometrics and get those muscle groups lit up. Like, One of my least favorite isometrics is a plank, because most individuals can't even do a yanda sit-up, and it's showing that they don't even have the ability to inhibit their hip flexors when they use their abdominals. If they're in a plank, they're using their hip flexors. And so an overly dominant muscle group is just becoming more and more trained, while the other muscles just, sub themselves off and take a break.
Yeah, no.
So,
So,
it depends on the choice.
and one thing I would say, I would gather too, and sort of talk about when it comes to isometrics and whether you're doing like a mid-thigh pull or a single leg mid-thigh pull or whatever. We talk about the strength training a lot, linkage versus leakage, right? One of the things that, when it comes to creating tension and breath and learning how to create high levels of tension, the stuff that I learned from Pavel, I mean, that methodology, just really learning how to brace and build up. If you know and understand how to apply that skill early on as a strength athlete, or even as an athlete in general, if you do get to the point where you do some of those isometrics, you're going to have less leakage, because you're going to actually know how to zip up your midsection. Because what most people do is they do a mid-thigh pull and they look like a damn scared cat, and they're like, look what I got. And I'm like, well, yeah, you produce X amount of force, but at what cost? And
Look at the
again, so
positions,
the whole idea is like, yeah, so what? You can produce force, but can you produce that force over time? And what does it look like? And where's the force coming from? And what is the byproduct? Where's that load coming from? So, but I feel like, going back to the idea of tension, most people really don't know how to create tension in general when it comes to strength training.
Nope, that's number one. First session. That's the first thing I teach my students at the university when we do our strength lab, our movement lab. We must teach people how to generate tension. And once they learn how to generate tension, then they learn the fundamental patterns. They can lift anything and do anything. Right? And
Yeah.
so that's absolutely critical. And then, of course, as Pavel would say, matching the breath with the force, matching the tension with the force. But you're better off to teach them high tension techniques first stop, full stop right away. So they have that ability, and they have the ability to access that. I mean, that's the first thing that I taught my son when he was probably 10 or 11 years old, is just how to generate tension, and then how to hold that tension in different movements. And it's fun because I do have people in my circles here that have learned that as well. And most of these individuals are strength coaches that have been doing this for 25 years, 30 years. I don't know what's translated to this new generation, but they're not learning concepts like corkscrew your feet, root your power into the ground, spread the floor, break the bar, get the barbell deep into your hand, squeeze the barbell. They're not learning any of this stuff.
Yeah, no, it's
So it's okay.
definitely
We can bring it
something.
back.
All right. So, Coach, we're going to change direction a little bit, and we'll talk about
Sure.
everyone's favorite ladder drills, right? And, some people are like saying, well, ladder drills are stupid. They're a terrible idea. And other people are saying, well, they're not bad considering what you're using them for. Let's talk about ladder drills quickly. And when are they good? When are they bad? When are they useful? When are they not?
My philosophy is based around neuroscience when it comes to any apparatus where the eyes are cast downwards. So if we want to effectively train the sensory motor system and involve the vision, so when we involve vision in what we're doing in terms of motor skills, we activate 70% more of the motor cortex. And we know that that's evidence informed. That's part of how I would do high level rehab with an athlete. So making sure that their head is up, eyes are up. So that's where my philosophy comes from. And when I discovered this, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, I went, oh my goodness, I can't believe I ever had even athletes, going to cones and looking down, right? Unless they're doing a skill in their sport where they have to look down momentarily, like to dig a ball, right? To dig a lacrosse ball out, or, scramble for a loose ball in the basketball court. But when you're actually surveying the court or the field, the head needs to be up. And we also want to think about movement. Movement is not planned and predictable and evenly spaced every time you take a step, right? You might take a step that is 22 inches long, and then you take your second step and it's 12 inches long because there's someone in your way. And then you take another step and you're now on a zigzag pattern. So playing a game of tag, for example, will train the visual system, in which it helps to enable the motor cortex, will allow the kids to do the read and react piece. It's more fun. You're sharing space with your opponent, so your eyes are cast on the person you're tagging, right? So you've got a narrow internal focus momentarily, and then boom, into a broad external focus where you're having to read and react to the people around you. And so if we imagine as well that a lot of kids today are not necessarily playing outside as much. Now, this isn't all neighborhoods and all kids, right? This is, some kids, and they're losing this stimulation of their vision and their ability to read and react and move their body. And then we put them in this petri dish environment on a ladder. It's not going to help them. And it also doesn't teach me much as a coach. Like if I'm doing a drill and I might have a guy or a girl lined up on a start line and they're beside another person, so they're going to race, and then I'm chucking tennis balls in the air, and the goal of the drill is to bat the tennis ball into their opponent's zone. That's the drill. There's a lot of things going on, a lot of things happening, and if I film this drill and I watch the film later on, because oftentimes when I'm coaching, I just coach. I film and then I go home and I watch the film, and that helps me plan my next coaching session as to the things that we might want to work on. Then I notice, oh, that's interesting. When this person sprints, they get out of their feet. They really start stretching their body out, and their head gets their head's in the wrong position, and their neck is hyperextended. Okay, these are some things I need to clean up on some movement drills before we start integrating more sport implements or balls or whatever and tracking stimulus. So yeah, I mean, it just limits the development. Then the other part that I absolutely hate, and I'll go on a soapbox, is quit putting kids in lines. Like if you have 7 kids waiting in line for any drill, to me, you're a terrible coach. Right off. Like, because I
Amen.
learned that in my second year of physical education school, because I did my degree in gym. Yes, I did. My degree is in gym, you guys. It's in gym class. I'm a very good PE teacher. Everybody should be involved. Everybody should be moving. And you know what? The kid that's not that good, guess what they're doing? They're constantly going back to the end of the line because the coach isn't noticing, because they're only watching the one kid do the one rep, right? Why not have every kid involved? You're playing a game, like a handball type game. Everybody's moving and you're watching everybody. You can notice really quickly the kids that are a little bit more clever, right? On the tag game, they're hanging around on the sideline. You might see the kids that are really brave and they're doing like the tag where they're like diving through the air. So that might be the kid that you need to do more shoulder work with, because they're going to be landing on an outstretched arm every single game. You learn a lot about the kids you're working with by gamifying stuff. Girls and boys. This is girls too. Absolutely. And Tiger Tail is my favorite tag game.
Now, one
Excellent.
of the things I think we make the mistake of as coaches is we coach to the drill, and we think the drill is the end game when it's really it's what it produces. And then we get into this dogmatic, block type practice where you're not getting really what you ultimately want to see in your greatest athletes, which is the rhythm, the coordination, the efficiency, the reactivity, and their ability to not only make decisions reactively, but also problem solve, and then be able to have their body do what it needs to do to execute that task. So from a motor learning standpoint, I think that I don't know if that's understood enough or appreciated enough when we're going to understand, okay, well, the drill is a means to the end. This is not, the goal is not, I don't need you to be the 5-10-5 champion of the world, right? I need you to actually be able to recognize, react, and do something about it. And tying that back, and I made a note when you're talking about the ACL thing, about that wide step being one of those things that may be a poor strategy that could be, at the very least, putting the brakes on when you want to really be accelerating and making you inefficient, but also leading you to potential injury, as you said. How much of the ability to and this is something that I think we can do, and I do work a lot on it in the weight room, is being able to manage a narrow base of support, right? To be more efficient. And so If you could talk about like those decision-making types of things that we could do and little things we could do to foster that so it becomes more reactive. So it becomes everything we do becomes more proprioceptively rich. So it does all tie together.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. In the weight room, what I love to do is single leg barefoot, right? So if you can do a pistol squat or an assisted pistol squat with youth athlete, an adolescent athlete. I've got kids that I've worked with that can back squat 375 terribly, I might add, in terms of technique. They can't pistol squat. They can't control anything on one foot, right? And I'm not saying bilateral lifting it should be out and everything should be single leg. Not at all. The reason why we do a bilateral lift is so that way we can move more weight and we can get fundamentally stronger. And it's a great methodology of putting on muscle mass. We can't forget that. You're not going to build massive hamstrings and glutes doing pistol squats, but starting barefoot with those types of drills is absolutely fantastic. And then even having athletes do some of their light tier plyometrics barefoot. So light tier, my definition, and I would agree with what Matt McInnes-Watson is teaching. So he and I talk all the time. He's an absolute genius when it comes to plyos. Light tier just means that the landings are quite safe. And when I'm coaching younger kids, because they all want to impress you and go as high as possible, I'll say, okay, I want you to imagine that you're hopping or leaping over your debit card, over a stack of cards. Like that's how high I want you to go, because we're going to work on your rhythm, your timing, and your frequency within a confined space. And we're going to do this barefoot. And because we're barefoot, we don't really want to be asking the foot to handle massive doses of ground reaction force. I'm a big fan of shoes and proper shoes when the forces get high. But when the forces are low, we can get a really good, rich proprioceptive input. So with my own son, with our little garage gym, it's just rubber floor. We do all of his warm-up drills barefoot. And we do all of his balance exercises involving like catching and throwing a ball, you can have kids play tag barefoot on one foot just for 10-second intervals, because being on one foot hopping around is exhausting. So every 10 seconds you blow your whistle, they switch feet and they hop around playing tag or playing some type of game, right? So that would sort of answer the proprioceptive. The other question you had, Eric, was around read and react. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you a solution for the weight room, because a lot of times, the coach might only be in that environment and there's not a lot of space to do read and react in a weight room. So you're thinking, okay, well, how can I do this? Well, really basic mirroring drills and shadowing drills. So you're faced up with your friend and your buddy does a 2-foot leap and then you do a 2-foot leap right afterwards. Right? Your buddy leaps to the side or does a lateral bound to their right. You're facing them. You're laterally bounding to your left. And then you wait for the stick, right? Or you do hop on one foot and stick. If I go forward, my buddy goes backwards. If I go to my right, they go to their left. If I go backwards, they go forward. These are drills that I learned years ago and I still use. I also use a lot of combative drills with resistance balls. So those big stability balls that were supposed to go out of style in the 90s, I still use because there's lots of excellent uses. So 2 athletes are holding these big giant stability balls and they're beating the tar out of each other with the stability ball. So they're trying to knock the ball out of the other guy's hand while they're standing on one foot. So you've got this reactive ability in the foot ankle, and you've got this fun environment, right? Where you're going toe to toe. You can even take a basic hand towel and you go single leg stance, tug of war, 10 seconds on one leg, switch arms, 10 seconds on the other leg, switch arms, right? So you've got all these ideas. You could also play the fantastic game of slaps, which I'm sure is probably canceled now too. So anyway, we're going to play it anyway, in my gym. So slaps is, hands are forward, palms are up. I'm on offense. Mike's on defense. He's got his hands hovering on top of mine. and I'm going to quickly try to slap Mike's hand. And over a period of time, I'm keeping score. So while I'm in offense for 1 minute, I got 20 slaps, right? And then it's Mike's turn. He's on offense in 1 minute. Mike beat me. He got 30. And with girls, you can do this stuff too. The only thing with girls is they will tend to cooperate a little bit more than compete. So you just need to encourage them and tell them, because they're very rational for the most part, hey, if you go a little harder against your teammate, it's actually going to help them get better. Oh, okay.
All
Right.
right.
So you just sort of spit it out. So that's like a million ideas, I know, but Joe at UBC out here, he and I do a workshop every year, and he runs the combative side of it. I do the plyos, and then he does the combative side. So if any of your readership wants the 11-minute video of all the drills, you guys, let me know, and I'll send you the link, and then they can watch it. There's all
Awesome.
kinds of ideas.
We will definitely post that in the show notes. And then, so I know we're winding down with time, but I'm going to sneak in one last kind of big bomb in here. So you asked a great philosophical question that ties with everything we've been talking about. And I think I might even responded to it, but you asked, what is athleticism? Were you able to land on an answer for that? And if so, would you land on?
Yeah, it reminds me of the other question I asked is, what is coordination? And I got a lot of really interesting insights, right? That's one nice thing about social media, is if you kind of put it out there, you do get a lot of really insightful, thoughtful expressions. And I think the challenge is that we don't actually agree on what is athleticism. So that first off is a problem. If we can't agree on athleticism. So for myself personally, I'm going to offer my bias. If someone said, I do track and field, I'm a really fast sprinter, I'd be like, okay, well, can you hit a baseball? Can you shoot on the fly? Can you do a step back jumper? Can you jump, land, and change direction? To me, those things are more athletic, but actually that's coming from a complete bias. So to me, an athletic person has a bigger buffet of motor skills that they have a certain level of proficiency in. So when I say motor skills, and this is actually evidence-based in terms of skills are classified into locomotor skills, object manipulation skills like shooting and catching and handling a ball. And then we've got like sort of the jumping and handling landings type of skill. So the locomotion is more your sprinting, your cutting, your change of direction, in space, as well as things like even like leaping and tumbling. So we could almost argue that somebody that can do a full somersault on the field, get up, run in the correct direction, and then chase down a defender might be a great athlete. We could say that. But then we could also say, oh, the person on the team that can dunk, they're a great athlete. But I don't think we are really sure what a great athlete is. And I haven't even talked about this, but I went back to school in 2019 to do sports psychology. And I got partially through the program that I was in, and didn't enjoy it that much because it was really heavy in just teaching kids like mental skills and different exercises. And I'm a bit more philosophical in my approach to mental performance. But why aren't we talking more about the kid that stays calm under pressure? Or why aren't we talking more about the kid that goes for every single loose ball but doesn't score all the goals in the game? Right? That's like, to me, there's a certain type of person that does that kind of work. Right? Coaches need to recognize this, and they need to recognize the whole person, not just what they can do, in terms of their quote unquote athleticism. So when I'm coaching, I try to figure this out. I try to find this out, because we're going to lose kids that go for every loose ball, that didn't win the VO2 max test, that didn't win the bench press test. We're going to lose that kid, but they're a valuable member of that team or of that. And, sure, I could be not talking about the most elite. The most elite will find their way. irregardless of how crappy their coaches were, by the way. They will find their way because it's quite genetic. Talent is quite genetic. But at the same time, there could be somewhat talented kids that were just not given the right opportunities or were pigeonholed early on, right? Oh, well, you're not that athletic, so you don't get to play, I don't know, defense, or you don't get to get you don't on the fast break play, we're not going to give the ball to you, right? So it's, I think we really, as coaches of any, whether we're the head sport coach or we're the performance coach or physical development coach, we're coaches, and we do need to see opportunities everywhere with everyone that we work with and really help these kids find their strengths and empower them.
Love it. So, all right, Coach, as we wind this down, what do you got coming up and what are you working on? Are there any things that we can look forward to in the future?
Well, what am I working on? Always working on content. So I have a membership portal in my website for people that are interested in some of the stuff I talked about today. You can join and you can cancel anytime. It's like Netflix. So you can go in the portal, pay your $19 and go, oh, I don't like this, I'm out, and cancel. Or you could go, this is okay, I'm staying. The portal is changing come the fall because I'll be hosting a guest every month. So I've got some guests coming on to do live webinars where it's purely Q&A. It's not anything contrived in terms of like a presentation. It's more, this is this person's background, come and ask them anything. So that's pretty exciting. And then I have my flagship course, which is my ACL Return to Play course. And it is for anyone that does active rehab at any stage. I do cover all stages of rehab, from the early, which is like right out of the hospital all the way to the end. But the people taking it are kind of a mix of physical therapists and strength and conditioning coaches. And that's pretty intense. I don't lie. It's about 6 hours a week of homework and pretty high level stuff. But if people are keen to learn, registration opens July 15th. And again, I'll send you, Mike, a coupon code for your audience if they are interested for a 20% discount.
Love it.
Spectacular. We thank you for that. And thank you for your time, Carmen. This has been absolutely awesome, as I expected it would be. And keep doing what you're doing, because I can't wait to read all your content as it comes out. It's great stuff.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate you guys. And thanks to your audience for tuning in. And please don't be shy to reach out. Probably best places on the social media. Maybe Instagram is probably the biggest place I hang out. And yeah, if there's anything that people are confused about, let me know, because that's how I build content. I build content because I see gaps in understanding. And don't be shy to admit when you don't understand something, because remember, I didn't understand the Krebs cycle and I still don't. So we'll end there.
Well, we need more people like you on social media, Carmen. So thank you again, and want to thank you for listening. And this has been the Principles of Performance Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Principles of Performance Podcast. If you've enjoyed our content, please like and share on your social media outlets, as well as subscribe and give us a review on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your preferred platform is to listen to. For more information on the Principles of Program Design courses and workshops, visit us at www.principlesofprogramdesign.com and follow us on all of the social media channels where we post new content every day. To save 10% on any PPD courses, enter the discount code PRINCIPLESPODCAST10 at checkout. If you have any questions we can answer or suggestions for the show, you can email us at info@principlesofprogramdesign.com or message us on social media. Thank you again for your support.